So, Leshia, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today. Can you tell us a little bit about you, your organisation and your role?
Sure. So currently I am Managing Director, Recreational Game at the England and Wales Cricket Board, which if I try to summarise my remit, I'm responsible for the holistic health of any cricket that you play for fun rather than money across England and Wales. I have direct responsibility for 32 people in my team in the ECB, but we invest in and performance manage 38 cricket boards or foundations, so sort of local delivery partners who deliver the game in the counties of England and in Wales. And we also work cross-functionally with teams at the ECB, such as facilities. I've been in that role since February of this year. I actually started my coaching journey when I was in Wales. I was CEO at Cricket Wales between 2020 and 2024. Literally joined just before COVID hit. And then left, come back to the ECB. I was actually prior at the ECB in the participation department before I went to Wales. So I've sort of gone a bit full circle on it. But yeah,
Fantastic.
I feel like I've come a long way, done a lot, particularly in the last sort of 8-9 months. But do genuinely feel that the coaching that I've had, gave me we'll go into it, I'm sure, but the sort of ability to prioritise, arrange myself, balance myself in my previous role, CEO at Cricket Wales, and unquestionably helped me in that process when I was even deciding if I wanted to apply for this job that I now have, and then sort of going through that process. But I'm sure we'll explore that in due course.
Well, yes, thank you. That's great. So probably my first question would be, can you explain the challenges you were facing when you were at Welsh Cricket and why you felt the LeaderLine coaching would be beneficial to you?
Yeah, I'll be really honest. When the opportunity was just sort of spoken about, it was just sort of spoken in passing at a Sport Wales sort of CEO forum event that I went to, and I probably just was a bit curious about it. I can't, hand on heart say it was a big problem and I, sort of needed something unlocking, probably because I hadn't realised quite what the problems were, because I hadn't taken any time to sort of think about it and express it and talk it through with people. So I'll be really honest, I fell into it, but I'm so glad I did, because particularly that first session sort of felt like a therapy session. There was so much that I had probably been just bottling up. If you sort of put yourself in my shoes at the time, I was, I'd moved to Wales, really didn't know anybody. COVID hit, so was then completely isolated from, colleagues for pretty much 18 months. I think it took me literally 17 months to get my whole team, my whole immediate management team in the same room at the same time, for all the restrictions and just kind of busyness, and Wales just being obviously an enormous country in square kilometres. So I had probably felt quite, isolated. I felt like I realise this now, I had spent a good few years literally trying to protect other people, and not thinking about myself. COVID hit so quickly and I felt very responsible for my sport. I felt very responsible for our participants. I felt extremely responsible for our people, keeping obviously the organisation afloat, keeping people sane, and also keeping people employed sort of long term. So I had adopted a sort of position, and I guess a sort of personal culture of trying to solve everybody's problems, literally, and not being at my best and solving sort of my problems in inverted commas first. And I was also living very close to work. I'd kind of deliberately done that. I'd lived in London for the rest of my career, and everywhere in London it takes an hour and a half to get anywhere. So for the first time I lived very deliberately close to work, but then I realized that because of that I was working till 8:30, 9 o'clock regularly in the office, and I'll just finish that off, and kind of coming out of COVID as well, where your office was your home and your home was your office, and it all got blurred anyway. All of those things combined, I realized at that first session quite how much I had taken on and what a toll that was taking on me, and that I was unquestionably performing suboptimally professionally, performing suboptimally probably as a person, living alone, well, apart from my cat, but you know, can't have a kind of chat with your cat. So yeah, I just needed an outlet to really just organize my thoughts, organize myself, prioritize correctly, prioritize myself. Yeah, and so that was, yeah, such an impact just in that first session to, yeah, reorder my thoughts and be able to look far more objectively at things and be really honest with myself and sort of allow myself to fail or allow myself just to say no to some things. And that, yeah, that really kind of just changed my personal life very, very quickly.
Thank you, Leshia. You've been very open. That's very much appreciated. So if you think then about the rest of your coaching and perhaps after your coaching experience, what do you think were the various ways in which you benefited from both a personal and professional life perspective?
As I say, I think it's having that entirely objective view, because especially in something like sport and especially in something like cricket, it is so small. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody has an opinion on everybody. And so to be able to speak, you know, very candidly, very openly to somebody who had no, you know, no knowledge at all, and no baggage, no, as I say, no judgment, was just so helpful, because I would never have been able, I don't think, to achieve that, particularly in a professional context. You know, even when you talk to your family about yourself or your job or your colleagues, you know, they are biased and they are going to tell you that you're wonderful. They will tell you that the people who've annoyed you are terrible people. And so, yeah, having, say, that objective view, and even it's going to sound so silly, but even just sort of setting aside and going physically to have these chats. So I would drive maybe an hour and a half for some of them. We'd sort of meet often in very salubrious, you know, sort of motorway service stations. But just having that time, setting that time aside, sort of saying, okay, so Tuesday afternoon is coaching afternoon. So it's like an hour's drive, it's sort of the hour and a half session, but then that hour and a half back, where you just kind of process everything that you've talked about, the actions that you're going to take, the other thoughts that you've had sort of coming out of that. It's sort of setting that time aside for you. Because often I just I literally bounce from one meeting to another. And yeah, setting that time aside to really stop, think, write some things down. I'm not like a brilliant sort of diary writer or anything like that. Yeah, but just sort of say physically setting that time aside for it just to be about, you know, I say me, but what I want to achieve for myself, but also for other people. And as I say, being able to talk about that in a very, I'm going to say, excuse me, I'm going to say dispassionate way, but I mean that in the best possible sense, you know, completely objective. And yeah, sort of strip it back to, well, sort of what's important here. So almost take a lot of the personality or the emotion or the history or the baggage out of the discussions. And it was things like, you know, how to land. I mean, I say a restructure. I think it was a positive restructure. It wasn't like we were trying to, you know, reduce the number of heads, but it would be sort of an uncertain time, especially after all the uncertainty of COVID. And how to sort of land that, I say, going through the process of, do I even want to apply and, you know, possibly make a change at that point. You know, I absolutely love my job at Cricket Wales, but, you know, sort of talking through sort of the pros and the cons, and say going through that interview process, and particularly the second interview actually, and sort of how you present yourself, obviously with the chair. As well as the chief exec, and just sort of the things to, it was like a 100-day presentation, the things to just consider. It wasn't sort of here's all the answers, but, you know, just to say that sort of objectivity. And I know a lot of it is almost like borrowing everybody else's ideas, you know, recycling sort of all the things that other people have seen and done. But it was kind of like I reflect, and it sort of made me feel like as when I had my first mentor. I mean, it was just to say again, it sort of made me stop, take a step back, and a proper think, but still to be authentically me, do it in my own way. But yeah, just having the benefit of so many other experiences that obviously sort of run through a coach. And yeah, drawing on that is, yeah, just so, it was so invaluable.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Leshia. It's been brilliant for you to spend time with us today. I know you're super, super busy. So glad that you've had a fantastic experience, and thank you for taking the time.
Well, thank you again. Really do appreciate the opportunity and everything that I've benefited from. So yeah, just huge thanks from me as well.